This is the story of how the biggest video chain on Earth was handed the future, on a silver platter, no membership card required, and waved it away like an overdue tape. Because, in the year 2000, a money-losing little startup called Netflix offered to sell itself to Blockbuster for $50 million. But Blockbuster said no. In fact, by some accounts, they laughed it right out of the room. And yet that same startup is worth hundreds of billions today, while Blockbuster is one lonely store in Oregon and a Halloween costume. Talk about a horror movie with a twist ending. But here is the part that should keep you watching, and no fast-forwarding. This is the good bit. It was not the internet that killed them. Instead, it was their own boardroom. So welcome to the Autopsy. On this channel, I put one dead company on the table and work out what really stopped its heart. No late fees. No rewinding. Just the cause of death. Tonight's patient, Blockbuster Video. And it is well overdue. So let me take you back to the scene of the crime, which, for me, looked an awful lot like a Friday night. 1994. Friday night. Dad backs the car out of the driveway with all four of us in it, and there is exactly one destination, and we all know it. The video shop. There is rain on the windscreen, which my mother thinks means we should stay home. Yet every kid knows that rain actually means the shop will be packed, because rain was the bat signal for the whole family. So you walk in, and there it is, that smell. Plastic clamshell cases, carpet, and microwave popcorn, and there is the wall. The new releases, one copy of each, every single one already checked out, just empty cases, sitting there mocking you. So you do what every family did. You fight over the one new release the shop actually has in stock, you lose, and instead, you settle for 5 weeklies for $10. A Sega Mega Drive and Mortal Kombat, if you were lucky. And on the way out, the 4 little words stuck to the counter that ran the entire industry. Be kind. Please rewind. That whole ritual is dead now. But the bit that should keep you watching is how the company that owned that ritual managed to fumble the whole franchise. Because the money-losing startup I mentioned was Netflix, and in the year 2000, it actually flew to Blockbuster's headquarters and offered to sell itself, the entire company, for $50 million. But Blockbuster said no. By some accounts, they laughed it right out of the room. So today Netflix is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, yet Blockbuster is one lonely store in Oregon and a Halloween costume. But missing Netflix is not even the damning part, that is just the trailer. Because Blockbuster did not simply fail to see the future. Instead, it saw the future, it held the future in its hands, it built the cure with its own money, and then it hit eject and tore the tape up. Over an argument about a bonus. So roll the feature presentation. This is Flatline. This is the business autopsy. And the patient on the table tonight is Blockbuster Video. So let us start where every autopsy starts, at the beginning, before the previews. With who the patient was when it was alive and healthy, because you forget how big this thing got. The first store opened in Dallas in 1985, and the thing that made it different was not the films, instead, it was the computer. A computerized checkout, when the competition was still writing your name in a book. So Blockbuster was, from day one, a tech company that just happened to rent movies. Hold that thought, because it is a plot point that pays off in the third act. But it changed hands faster than a returned rental. Because by 1987, it was being built into a machine by Wayne Huizenga, the bloke who had made waste management out of rubbish trucks, so he knew a thing or two about taking out the trash. Then Viacom bought the lot in 1994 for around $8.5 billion. So remember that number, $8.5 billion, because we are about to watch it rewind all the way down to zero. At its peak though, this thing was a colossus. A genuine blockbuster. Because by 2004 it ran 9,094 stores worldwide, around 84,000 staff, across 26 countries, pulling revenue somewhere near $6 billion a year. So if you were a kid anywhere in the Western world in the 90s, this company was the gatekeeper of your weekend. That is the admission. That is the patient at full health. A global giant, profitable, dominant, with a logo so famous it is, to this day, an actual Halloween costume. But now, the symptoms. And the first symptom is almost too neat, because it is the symptom that became the cure, that became the killer. So pause on this one. Late fees. You rented a tape, you got a due date, and if you missed it, you paid, and paid, and paid. So that little sticker on the counter, "Be kind, please rewind," was not a courtesy. Instead, it was a revenue line. Because by 2000, Blockbuster was raking in something in the order of $800 million a year just in late fees, around 16% of its total revenue. Now treat that exact split as a rough figure, but hold the shape of it. A full sixth of this company's money came from finding its own customers for hitting stop a day late. So that is not a side business. Instead, that is a structural addiction. And here is the irony, so sharp it could open a vein. The man who built the thing that killed Blockbuster did it because of a Blockbuster late fee. Because Reed Hastings has told the story for years. He got slapped with a roughly $40 late fee for bringing Apollo 13 back late. $40. So the disease grew its own antibody, and then the antibody walked right in the front door, no membership card required. Which brings us to the diagnosis. The meeting. The main feature. The one you came here for. So Netflix was founded on the 29th of August 1997 in Scotts Valley, California, by Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph. It started as DVDs by mail, no late fees, no driving in the rain. But by 2000, it was a tiny money-losing little thing. So Hastings, Randolph and their CFO Barry McCarthy got on a plane, flew to Blockbuster's Dallas headquarters, and sat down across the table to pitch the deal of the century. They offered to sell Blockbuster the whole thing. And the figure that gets cited, over and over, is $50 million. But now I have to be honest with you, because that is the rule on this channel. No spoilers, I cannot back up. The exact words in that room are contested. Antioco and Blockbuster have disputed there were ever serious talks, and the famous line, that Netflix got laughed out of the room, traces back to McCarthy and Randolph's recollections, not a recording. So I am not going to put words in a dead meeting's mouth. But the part nobody contests, the only part that matters, Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix for about $50 million, and instead, it pressed stop. Because McCarthy remembered them being waved off as a very small niche business. And on paper, in 2000, that was a perfectly reasonable read. Netflix was bleeding money. Blockbuster had 9,000 stores. So paying $50 million for a niche mail-order outfit would have looked like renting a flop. But that is the thing about hubris. It is almost never stupidity. Instead, it is usually just being right about yesterday, and assuming the sequel plays exactly the same. So Blockbuster said no, and for a while it looked like a fine call. They were reassured by their own size, but then the size became the weight that drowned them. And here is where the autopsy gets genuinely interesting, the plot twist nobody tells you. Because the popular version is, old company too dumb to see the internet. But that is not what the body says. Blockbuster saw it. In fact, Blockbuster fought back, and for a moment, it fought brilliantly. Because in 2004, they launched Blockbuster Online, DVDs by mail, a frame-for-frame remake of Netflix's Homework. Then, at the start of 2005, they did the unthinkable. They killed late fees. The No More Late Fees program. So they reached into their own chest, grabbed that 16% artery, and clamped it shut on purpose. Ending late fees alone is reckoned to have cost them on the order of $400 million in revenue, and that is before the hundreds of millions they were pouring into the online build. But then, in 2006, Antioco rolled out the masterstroke, Total Access. You could rent online, then walk into a store, hand back your mail DVD, and get a free in-store rental on the spot. And Netflix could not match it, because Netflix did not have 9,000 stores. So for the first time, Blockbuster was taking subscribers off Netflix. The incumbent had found the answer. The monitor was beeping. The line was climbing, and that is the actual moment of death. Not the meeting in 2000. Instead, the moment Blockbuster figured out how to win, and then fired the man who figured it out. So roll the blooper reel. Because while Antioco was spending hundreds of millions to win the future, two things were happening behind his back. The first was the balance sheet. Because when Viacom split Blockbuster off in 2004, it did not just let it walk free, instead, it loaded it up first, like sending your kid off to fight Netflix wearing a backpack full of bricks. Before the split, Blockbuster paid out a special dividend of $5 a share, roughly $900 million, funded with new debt. So it stepped onto the battlefield against a lean, debt-free Netflix, already carrying about $1 billion of borrowed money on its own back. So it went into the fight winded. But the second thing was a man named Carl Icahn, corporate raider, professional pain in the box office. Because in 2005, Icahn became Blockbuster's largest shareholder, ran a proxy fight, and won 3 board seats at the May annual meeting. And he looked at Antioco spending $400 million a year to drop late fees and subsidize free rentals. Total Access reportedly lost about $2 on every in-store swap, and instead of a strategy, he saw a man setting fire to the company's profits, chasing a future that might never pay off. So from where Antioco sat, he was buying survival. But from where Icahn sat, he was buying ruin. And neither of them was being stupid. So that is what makes it a tragedy instead of a comedy, even if the puns suggest otherwise. So the two of them went to war, and the war came to a head over the smallest, pettiest thing imaginable: Antioco's 2006 bonus. Because the board, now stacked with Icahn's people, did not want to pay it. So the fight over that bonus poisoned what was left of the relationship, and in March 2007, Antioco agreed to leave. The man who had built the strategy that was actually beating Netflix, walking out the door over a bonus dispute. And in came Jim Keyes, former boss of 7-Eleven, on the 2nd of July 2007. From Slurpees to the streaming wars, so Keyes did exactly what the board hired him to do. He looked at the bleeding online business and the no late fees giveaway, and instead of doubling down, he rewound the whole thing. He pulled back the subsidy, refocused on the stores, on merchandising, on stopping the losses. On paper, completely sensible, cut the thing that is losing money. But therefore Blockbuster stopped competing with Netflix at the exact moment competing with Netflix was the only thing that could save it. They had the cure in their hand. They had synthesized it themselves. And yet the board dropped it in the return bin, because it was too expensive. And look at the calendar, because the calendar is brutal. Netflix launched streaming Watch Now on the 16th of January, 2007. The same year Antioco left. So by early 2009, Netflix had over 10 million subscribers, and the DVD itself was already heading straight to the bargain bin. Because the ground both companies had been fighting over physical discs was vanishing under both of them. But only one of them had been building the boat. So we come to the time of death. Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on the 23rd of September, 2010, around $900 million in debt. The chain had already collapsed from 9,000 stores to roughly 1,700 struggling ones. The stock had fallen below $1 and been delisted. That $8.5 billion company Viacom, bought in '94, the equity was worth essentially nothing. So the end credits, rolling. Then, in April 2011, Dish Network bought the carcass at the bankruptcy auction for somewhere between $230 and $320 million, depending on how you count it. And the last company-owned stores went dark between November 2013 and January 2014. Final showing. No encore. And the autopsy finding, the cause of death I would write on the certificate, is not ignored the internet. Instead, it is the opposite. Because the cause of death is that Blockbuster found the answer, and then its own governance killed the answer to protect the profits. Antioco built the cure. But the debt Viacom strapped on made the cure feel unaffordable. So Icahn and the board forced out the man holding it. And then Keyes dismantled it. So it died in a boardroom over a bonus, not in the market over a product. The company was reassured by its own size and its own profits, right up until the size and the profits became the exact reasons it refused to save itself. So now, the modern parallel, the moral of the movie, and then I will let you go. The trap that killed Blockbuster has a name, and it is the most dangerous trap in business, a healthy, profitable revenue stream that you have to destroy in order to survive. Because late fees were not a bug. Instead, they were 16% of the money. So every instinct, every spreadsheet, every shareholder screamed, protect it. But protecting it is exactly what killed them. So whenever you see a dominant company that physically cannot bring itself to cannibalize its own best product, Kodak sitting on the digital camera it invented, the newspapers clutching their classified ads, you are watching the same disease. Because the most profitable thing you do is very often the thing you will die defending. And here is the epilogue nobody expects. Because the very last Blockbuster on Earth is not a memory, it is still open. One store, in Bend, Oregon, is the sole survivor on the entire planet. 9,094 stores, 26 countries, an $8.5 billion empire, and it all funnels down to a single shop that hangs on now as a kind of shrine. People fly in from around the world just to get a membership card and stand in the aisles one more time. So the giant that turned down the future ended up as the exact thing it once made extinct, a nostalgia trip you have to travel to. Be kind indeed. So the giant had the future fly to its office and offer itself for $50 million. But it said no. Then it built the future itself. But then it fired the future and tore the tape up. So that is the autopsy. The line went flat in a boardroom, not a marketplace. Roll credits. Be kind. Please rewind. I am going to go feel old now. I will see you on the next feature.